program, our 6 p.m. executive session for the purpose of discussing strategies with respect to potential litigation against the Commonwealth of Massachusetts due to the impacts associated with Chapter 358 of the Act of 2020, the so-called housing choice legislation, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, and for the purpose of discussing the purchase, exchange, lease, value of real property at 333 Andover Street, in accordance with Mass General Law 30A, Chapter 30A, and Section 21A and 6. I would ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First on our agenda is the transmitting of Treasury warrants. Treasury warrants number 20-2352, 20-2352 WIRES, 52A, 2400, 2401, 2401W, 53A, 2354, 2354W, 2402, 2402W, and 2402T. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Second, we'll be approving the minutes from July 10th, 2023.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of July 10th, 2023.
Second.
All those in favor? So moved.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may, if there's no objection, I would kindly request that we take one particular item out of order this evening, if that's okay with you.
Yes, it is.
Kindly request that we take our salute to service out of order. Tonight, we have our recipient in the room, and in respect for their time and their family's time, I thought it might be appropriate to take it up at the beginning instead of 5 hours from now.
Bite your tongue.
May I?
Yes, you may.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure tonight, on behalf of the board, to present tonight's salute to service to a longtime resident who is with us this evening. And in a moment, I'll ask our chair to present the certificate on behalf of the board. Tonight's recipient is Mr. John C. Wallace, Sr., who served in the United States Navy from September of 1963 to September of 1967. Served on the USS Theodore E. Chandler, DD-17, and was awarded 2 Navy combat ribbons for actions on June 14th, June 22nd of 1967. While serving aboard as an electrician's mate, 3rd class, he was also awarded the National Defense Service Medal, Republic of Vietnam Service, and campaign medals. He joined out of the city of Boston and left for service at the U.S. Naval Supply Depot in Seattle, Washington. Today, John continues to support veterans throughout the community. If you've ever been at any of their community events, you've seen John there. Volunteering for anything and everything, from ramps for veterans, spouses in wheelchairs, to volunteering for events to put on community supporting veterans in any manner, and their families. He's very active as a leader of the Boy Scout Pack 156 and had been involved with the Scouts for many, many years. So tonight, it's my distinct pleasure on behalf of the Board of Selectmen to salute Mr. John Wallace. Thank you so much for your service. We salute you.
Come on up, John.
Salute to service. The Wilmington Select Board recognizes John C. Wallace Sr. for service to this country in the United States Navy as an electrician mate, 3rd class, earning 2 Naval Combat Unit action ribbons, a National Defense Service Medal, the Republic of Vietnam Service and Campaign Medals, and for the service to this community. Congratulations.
Thank you for your service.
Done?
Okay, our first appointment is at 7 o'clock, and it's Joseph N. Devlin Esquire, Upton Conley, Connell and Devlin LLP, read a public hearing for the application transfer pledge of inventory license in stock of all alcohol package store license of 211 Lowell Street. Excuse me. DBA Eastgate Liquors, to Eastgate Liquors, WIL NR LLC, DBA Eastgate Liquors. Property is located at 211 Lowell Street.
Mr. Chair, I would note that the applicant originally requested this date for a public hearing after the notice was published and they paid the necessary fee for the advertising. They reported back that they had a conflict with this evening. Since the notice has already been published in the town crier, it was published July 5th, and I would ask the administrative assistant to verify that that date has been published. I would suggest that the board consider, or that the chair consider opening the public hearing, and then that the board take a separate vote to authorize the continuance to August 14th, which is the date that the applicant has indicated they can be prepared to be here.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for a motion to open up the hearing.
So moved?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? And now I'm going to ask the board to make a motion to continue the hearing until August 14th
At
So
7
moved.
PM.
at 7 PM.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor? So moved. This is being continued to 8/14 on, at 7 PM. Now we have a 7:10 appointment, which is Hugh McNeil, Lieutenant Wilmington Minutemen. Request for placing a Liberty pole at Rotary Park.
Mr. Chairman?
Lieutenant can't be here right now. I'm the chaplain of the Minutemen. If I could address the board.
Very good. One moment.
Mr. Chairman, before we start, just for disclosure purposes, I am the current captain of the Wilmington Minutemen, and I did talk to town council about participating in this discussion and taking a vote, so I'm cleared to do both, but I'm going to let our chaplain lead the discussion.
Very good. Go ahead, sir.
First, I'd like to start by reading an article. I believe it was around 2008, the Wilmington Town Crier. Some time ago, at a Liberty Pole ceremony, 6 Wilmington Minutemen gathered in the rain to lower the pole and dress it with a new red cap. In many town centers, a tree or pole was designated to be a gathering site for the patriots. Assemblies were regularly held to express views and vent emotions. When a meeting was being called, a red cap or banner was raised, as this pole became a symbol of freedom, independence, and strength. This is why it is so important that the Wilmington Minutemen reconstruct the Liberty Pole. And with that being said, it is a tradition of the original Wilmington Minutemen that started the charter in 1968, I believe. And with the pole, we took care of the pole until it finally couldn't be held together anymore. We tried everything, cement, plastic, wood, rope, and it finally came down, and it was taken upon one of our Minutemen who has since passed away, Private Bodnar, and then COVID hit, and now under the leadership of Captain West, we've been able to purchase and have a pole, which is being built right now. And what we ask is if we could put it back somewhere in the same vicinity in Rotary Park, if it's possible.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments?
I do.
Lou?
Please. Thank you for coming here and presenting this. Just looking at the structure, I don't have an issue with this by any, it's just out of curiosity. Because it looks like it can be climbed, and I know it's not for the purposes of climbing, do we have anything to prevent kids from climbing it? That would be my only concern.
That, to answer your question, no.
Okay,
But we do take the pole down. It's a pole that can be brought up. It's
Oh, okay.
not climbed up to put the cap on it. The pole is on a base with two pins, and we take out the top pin and lower the pole.
okay,
And we put the cap on, and we usually leave it up on, we've set the pole up in the past, because I've been to many pole cappings in town. And what we do is, on or about Patriots' Day, we set the pole up.
okay.
And then it's been a long-standing hurrah, hurrah, the 1st of May, the Liberty Pole comes down today. So it's not like it's something that we leave up
All the time,
all
okay.
year round.
Great, thank you for clarifying that, I appreciate it.
Welcome.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, there are several Minutemen, members of the Wilmington Minutemen here. If you'd like to just stand up, just so you can see that we've got several members here in attendance.
And introduce yourselves.
My name is Keith Major, private. I am a chaplain assistant Austin Major.
Karen West Private. Mary Kelly Private.
Adjutant Sergeant Mary Peter.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming.
Chair,
Yes,
I see Jimmy McGaldy is out there, and I don't want to spot him, but his name was mentioned in the letter. That you want to add anything to this? Where is it going to be located, and, on the,
Thanks, Mr. Kara. Yeah, I don't believe we've selected an exact location yet. It would be the general vicinity where the old one was. After the approval, the plan was to meet out on site with the DPW operations manager and select a location that we felt was in maintenance best interest. Maybe put a stake in the ground and get the approval from the Minutemen at that point. But I would believe it would be generally in the same location as the old one was, which is essentially on the Adelaide Street side of Rotary Park.
so you have no objections to anything that, with the building of this?
I don't have any objections, to the microphone. DPW doesn't have any objections. The Liberty Pole is something that I remember as a kid growing up in town. And we can certainly, I talked to Mr. West about this previously, we can certainly assist with the install, although I know that there is a contractor doing the fabrication of the pole.
And one last thing, I just want to let you know that our Lieutenant, Hugh McNeil, just did come into the room.
Thank you for coming, sir. Now I can take it. I can take what you said now.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to recommend that we take out of order number 6 on board to consider the authorization to install the installation of the Liberty Pole at Rotary Park by the Wilmington Minutemen. Do I have a motion?
Move to grant the request.
Second? So moved. All those in favor? You got your pole.
All right, sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our docket is Jamie McGaldy, PE, MCA, DPW Director, and Bree Sullivan, Gale Associates, regarding the Wilmington High School field replacement.
Again, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, those at home that don't know me, I'm Jamie McGaldy, Public Works Director, here tonight with Bree Sullivan from Gale Associates. Gale Associates is an engineering design firm specializing in sports facilities. Also behind me in the audience is Athletic Director for the School Department, Dennis Ingram. So we're here tonight to discuss our options for the replacement of the existing synthetic turf carpet at the turf field at Alumni Stadium at Wilmington High School. If you recall, Article 21 of the April 29, 2023 town meeting asked voters to approve FY24 funding to prepare design documents to replace the existing synthetic turf carpet. The intent at that time at town meeting was to replace it with a new synthetic turf carpet in kind or a variation of synthetic turf using current options that are available for infill. There was a proposed amendment on the floor of town meeting which asked the town to add the option of replacing the turf carpet with natural grass as a consideration. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to present those options that are available to us and discuss the positives and negatives, and ultimately ask the board for a design directive endorsement so that we can engage a design firm to begin plans and specifications for a planned FY26 replacement of the turf carpet. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bree, who will give a brief presentation on synthetic turf and our options.
Thank you, Jamie. As Jamie said, my name is Bree Sullivan. I am the Chief Civil Engineer at Gale Associates. And I've put together a brief presentation on synthetic turf and infill options. So starting out with a little background on Gale's experience in this type of work. Gale had the honor of being the first engineering firm in 1999 to put the first modern infilled field on the eastern seaboard for the most part, and the second in the United States at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. I think maybe at the time it was ULowell, I can't remember. Since that time, we have done over 275 synthetic turf facilities and over 175 running tracks, and that number, 24 million and change square feet, is the square footage of synthetic turf that we've actually designed since then. And a few other experience points for Gale. Past 8 years, we've done over 100 synthetic turf fields, averaging over 12 or so per year. In that time, we've been the recipient of 10 ASBA awards for distinguished single field and multi-field facilities, and you can see some of those here. So, I think that probably most people in this room who are my age or older will remember AstroTurf. That was the first synthetic, first generation, 1966 Houston Astrodome, aka AstroTurf. It originally started with the name Chemgrass, which today would have a much different connotation, right?
Yeah.
And it was comprised of short nylon fibers, and it's not unlike the carpet you see these days that doesn't look like turf at all. Second generation came around in 1970s, and it was with polypropylene fibers. You can see it there, launder fibers, and you could see they placed it on concrete, or you could see gravel there. And then they had sand infill, but it was really hard on the players' lower extremities, and when you fell, it wasn't really forgiving. And we fast forward to the third generation, which was the 1990 to the 2000, 2 to 2.5 inch fibers polyethylene with a combination of crumb rubber and sand infill. And that's really what we use today. So a more detailed breakdown of the third generation system, and it is a system, as you can see here, turf and infill, and then the shock pad underneath. Shock pads are optional for some of the infills, and we'll get into the details in a little bit. Drainage stone, that's where the rainwater will go when it drains through the carpet, and that's what they call it. They call it a carpet. It is manufactured, for the most part, by carpet manufacturers. And then the geotextile and the prepared subgrade. So here is a further breakdown of the turf system, the modern turf system. And just so you're aware, the existing field at the high school already has the sublayers of this, and this turf would literally be changing the carpet and the infill. Some of the options, starting on the left here for infill, these are some of the more common options today for infills. The SBR on the bottom is, and I'm not even gonna try to pronounce it, but essentially it's ground up car tires, post-consumer ground tires, car tires that are ground up. They go through a process, they extract the metals, they wash it, and then they package it for use in athletic fields. Some of the alternatives to the crumb rubber has gotten a undeserved negative reputation. It's a well-studied media, and we'll get into that further in the presentation. They're divided into two groups: synthetic infills and natural infills. And you can see a couple of them here. Brockfill, Safe Shell, and Organic are natural infills, so to speak. Brockfill is essentially ground up pine from, it's a post-milling process from the processing of pine. Safe Shell is walnut shells. And Organic is, that one that's pictured there is actually green clay, which is a combination of coconut husks. As you can see the fibers, and there may even be a little bit of cork mixed in there. And then we have the synthetic infills. TPE is extruded plastic, little plastic pellets. EPDM is a very similar material that they use on the track surface on the top. So it's virgin rubber. It hasn't gone through the vulcanizing process. And EnviroFill is essentially painted sand. They put an acrylic coating on the outside of the sand particles. And you can get that actually in green. That particular brand you can get in green and brown. And then we go through the assembly here. There are really three types of turf that you see today. When the turf was first introduced in the 90s, they started with slit film, and that's all you could get. And then they decided that it would be better if they added a different fiber or tried a different fiber, and they're preferred for different uses. Slit film you would use, it plays faster for faster sports that you play, like lacrosse and football. Monofilament is more for like soccer, where you want more ball control. And then dual fiber is mostly what we specify today because it's a true dual purpose material. And then we have the,
Second.
yep,
What is our field right now?
what material?
What material?
Judging by the date of install 2013, it's probably monofilament, but I haven't actually looked at it to know.
Thank you.
But typically around that time, that's what they were installing. And then the turf underlayments, that essentially, what you see there really looks like a carpet pad because it very much is like a carpet pad, but it's stiffer. It's placed underneath the turf, and it's required with several of these infills here. With EPDM and SBR rubber, you don't need the pad, it's optional, but you can use the pad. And the idea of the pad is it provides that cushioning when the infill does not. So here's more on the shock pad. Some studies show that it reduces concussions, and of course that's concussions striking the ground, not helmet-to-helmet concussions. And it's got a firmer feel with softer results. And to go just quickly through the process of how do they change the turf? So this is the process here. It's relatively simple. Once they start the turf installation process, it takes anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks. To actually get to that point, it may take 2 or 3 more weeks, so 6 weeks total. Track protection is laid down, and erosion controls are set, if any. Removal of the existing turf and infill. One of the things that you can do when they remove the turf is to recycle the existing turf, and that's actually a money saver. Then take the base stone, once they roll the carpet up, they take it off the site. They'll take the base stone and they'll regrade it. So any sort of irregularities in the surface planarity will be fixed at that point. And then if there's a shock pad used, the new shock pad would be installed. The turf would then be installed on top of the shock pad. Basically, the turf comes in 15-foot rolls. They roll it out, and then they seam it together with adhesive. And then they will they'll actually cut the lines in. So some lines come in from the factory, depending on the way the lines are. And if there's a center logo, that will be cut in as well. And then the infill is installed, and it's final grooming, and it's tested. So some of the advertised synthetic turf advantages: low maintenance, lower overall lifetime cost per use, and so that's over the years of the life of the turf. Permanent lines and markings. Nearly all weather use, you could actually use synthetic turf in the rain as long as there's no lightning. And grass-like look and performance. High utilization. You can use synthetic turf all day and all night, and it's not going to wear out faster. Typically, it doesn't wear out faster, and it's not going to tear up like grass would. You can actually have revenue opportunities. I don't know if you do any revenue opportunities now, but you can actually lease the field or rent the field. And the immediate availability, that would be with respect to after a rainstorm. And so what we have found in our synthetic field design is that typically one synthetic field can replace 2 to 3 natural grass fields. And vice versa. If you migrate from a synthetic turf field, and there are some communities that are looking into that, I haven't heard too many doing it, but you're probably going to need to get the same use, the same play time out of the field. You're probably going to need 2 to 3 times the field that you have now. And so these are some of the associated natural turf maintenance costs that you would expect if you had a grass field instead of a synthetic turf field. And so we didn't obviously add in the amount for the additional staff likely needed, but my conversations with Jamie was that if that field were in fact grass, there would probably be a need for an additional staff member to maintain the field. So it's about $26,000 a year if you include all these things that we have here. Some of this stuff might be done in-house, so you could play with the numbers any way you wanted. And so, and down at the bottom, the synthetic turf maintenance, the routine grooming is generally done by staff that are already employed, and then the deep grooming is necessary 6 months, 1 year, depending on how much you use it. That really removes debris and removes, sometimes there's hairpins in there if you use it for field hockey, things like that. And that's generally outsourced because that's specialty equipment. So what are the risks? There's a lot of talk about risks these days with synthetic turf. And some of those things are injuries, chemical compounds in the turf and the infill that may be harmful, that some have said are harmful to people, microbes, for instance, bacteria, and temperature. So injury incidents, synthetic versus grass, what impacts injuries? So when we talk about injury incidents, you really want to talk about apples to apples and not apples to oranges. And so there are so many variables when it comes to injury incidents. Sport dependent, depending on what you're using the field for. The type of turf, I talked about the different turfs that are available, the slit film and the monofilament and the multi-use turf. Competition level, we expect to see more injuries at higher competition levels, pro sports, college sports. Surface condition, the condition of the infill, if it's not groomed on a regular basis, that can affect injury incidents. And for specifically for grass fields. If you have bare spots, that can affect injury incidents. And injury rates are higher for previous generation turf, so that as the turf gets better, the goal is obviously to have improvements in injury incidents. Some of the studies that have been done are contradictory. So crumb rubber. So crumb rubber has been used since the first fields were installed in 1999. It's prolific. For the fields that Gale did in 2022, 60% of those fields had crumb rubber. It's made from recycled tires. And anecdotally, what we hear is the players love crumb rubber, and typically the people who don't want crumb rubber are not the ones who use the field, and that's anecdotal. Because of all the attention that crumb rubber has been getting, the EPA and other organizations in the government did a federal research action plan specifically for the crumb rubber. And it's a multi-agency study, and it's a two-part study. One is to characterize the crumb rubber. That part of the study, which is phase 1, is complete. And the phase 2 is sort of the toxicology of it, like how it affects the players. So first they had to figure out what was in and above the crumb rubber, and then they had to determine how it affects the people who use the field. Phase 2 is currently underway, or they're wrapping it up, and it will be published soon. So from the characterization study, crumb rubber is made up of most chemical constituents, as we would imagine, and they also went through the physical properties of it. They measured microbes on the crumb rubber. They did emission testing above the crumb rubber to see if there was any off-gassing. And they also looked at the bioaccessibility of the crumb rubber. And basically what that means, I'm a civil engineer, I'm not a toxicologist. What I've been told is how easily can it get into the human system, whether through saliva or other parts of the body. So what they found was there are a range of chemicals, metals, and organic compounds, which is no surprise. Air emissions of organic chemicals is low. Bioaccessibility of metals is low, and if I recall from reading the study, it's about 3%. And bacteria levels are similar to reported levels found on things at home, kitchen counters and different things like that. Phase 2 of the Federal Research Action Plan is a risk assessment, and it'll be released at a later date. So going into the relative costs, we skipped over a lot of stuff here, but the relative cost so this chart was developed specifically for the size of the field at the high school, 82,000 square feet. And this price you see per square foot here is actually the turf and the infill cost. And so what I have here at the asterisk is the shock pad. So the infill with the asterisk requires the shock pad. You can't opt out of it. So the virgin EPDM and the crumb rubber, you don't need a shock pad, but you can certainly put one in there if you want. And so these total costs that are shown here reflect that shock pad added into the cost as well. And then the difference in cost is the difference in cost relative to crumb rubber. Now, what it doesn't say here on the crumb rubber is this is if you remove the existing crumb rubber and you get rid of it and you put brand new crumb rubber in. You can save anywhere between $20,000 and $30,000 if you reuse it. You take the old crumb rubber, you put it in the field, and then they supplement it. This number is for all new. And that's the end of the presentation, and I will, I actually brought some samples if you have any questions like what is this infill like or this infill. I have samples, and I can show you those if you want. It's up to you.
Thank you. I'll start off with, my first question would be, what's the affect if we decided to use the Brock fill, for instance, on the field? Does it make it that much harder, or that much softer, or does it stay about the same?
So there's a difference in how it feels underfoot, but that difference is subtle. I know that Jamie had shared with me that he went to a field with Brockville on it. I don't, was it Borica that did it, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll elaborate on that.
Okay.
after,
Yeah. It's really the shock pad that would pick up the extra cushioning, and so the way that we gauge impact absorbing ability is through a GMAX test, and just two tests, is the HIC test and the GMAX test, but the fields were just recently tested with the GMAX test, and I can tell you with the pad, the GMAX test will never fail. You'll never get a reading above the number that's failing. So from that test standpoint, it's all relative, right? And so as far as the industry standard is concerned, it will pass throughout the life of the turf.
So, Mr. Chairman, my concern right now with using the Brockville, and just as a reminder, using Brockville would still be a synthetic turf carpet, but it would be an organic or a natural material infill, so that would be the option there. I did go to Billerica's field, the Lamson field, which was recently finished, I believe, last fall. I looked at that field about 2 weeks ago with another staff member. My experience with that is that the cushioning under your feet was much more rigid than what we have at the high school. I did talk to the town of Billerica, who put me in contact with the design engineer to get the GMAX test results. And again, the GMAX test is a measure of how rigid the field is for concussion resistance. And they did tell me that it passed with flying colors. What I'm concerned about with the Brockville is that it is a relatively new material.
It is.
So what we have at the high school field is a product that has been out on our field for 10 years. And we're still passing the GMAX test. It's climbing. The idea with GMAX is that you want your number to be under 200 on average. We're up to about 155 right now after 10 years. But with a little bit of deep decompaction and the regular maintenance we do on it, we're able to keep that cushioning, no problem. So I am a little bit concerned to invest all this money in a product that really isn't tried and true yet. So that would be my concern there, although maybe Bree can elaborate on when Brockville came out. Do you have that information, how long it's been?
So
Used.
I believe we used it first 5 or 6 years ago, so it hasn't quite been out for a decade. Yeah.
Another concern that I had with all the rain that we've had, the makers of Brockville are saying that this material doesn't float. What essentially Brockville is, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, is that it's a southern yellow pine crumb. So it's essentially
is.
wood chip material, very fine. My concern long-term with a wood product, just like wood products in our playgrounds, is that they compost. So do we know yet, 8-10 years from now, that we might have weeds growing in a synthetic carpet that now we have to treat with a pesticide? I don't know that, to answer you. It may or may not be a problem, but again, would be experimenting with that. The other problem that I saw on Billerica's field was a lot of migration of the product to one side. Although the football field looks flat, it's actually crowned for drainage. And during a really heavy rain, I suspect that material, when it's really raining hard, is floating up and actually drifting off to the side, which requires more maintenance to bring it back to the center to restore your concussion resistance.
Second question I have, totally hypothetical, but for use other than a sporting event, this material, we'll put, say we were gonna have a function where we wanted to put chairs out on it. Does that damage the field with the compression?
It all depends. What do the chairs look like? What do the
Say
the
they're
feet look
regular
like?
folding chairs we'll use.
Regular folding chairs, I would have to ask and get back to you, and it might vary per manufacturer.
I'm just curious on that, where it's, if we can expand the use of the field for a situation like that, it might be more comfortable with what we're paying and everything. And if not, but I want to get the answers to those as soon as we can.
I can tell you that the turf manufacturer will tell you if you put bleachers on the field, on the grass, and then some some locations, they do have the synthetic turf extends out beyond, because they don't have a track around it. They tell you, you really have to put special paths down for the
Oh,
leach.
okay.
So you gotta spread it out. And there are certain instances where you could void your warranty, which you don't wanna do.
Thank you. No.
And we've been really careful the last couple times. Graduation, for instance, has been out on the field, just to make accommodations. So I think no matter what we choose here, if we stay synthetic, you know, we can kind of call an audible at the time, whatever's necessary to protect the field if we were to put some chairs on.
Anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you both for the presentation, and I thank Mr. Ingram for being here as well. Jamie, if we were to consider changing course and moving away from synthetic, would there be any, could you anticipate any additional costs based on some of the equipment that we have right now to maintain it is for specifically for the synthetic? Would we have to invest in new equipment?
So if we were to go back to natural grass, for instance?
Well, no, I mean, if we were to choose any of this, like for instance, the Brockville that's been mentioned here previously, would that result in having to buy any additional equipment?
I guess it depends on what the material is. We have the standard equipment to maintain an SBR crumb rubber field, which is essentially a long magnet that's towed behind on essentially it's a golf cart, but it's what's called a gator, and a litter cat, and light decompaction equipment. So if that's all that's necessary for some of the alternative infills, then it's likely we wouldn't need to expand it. If we did, it would be minor. To be honest, my concern with going back to a natural grass, which is one of the options, would be reverting back to where we were, you know, over 10 years ago. And the big problem there in the early 2000s was the lack of field space.
Mm-hmm.
The major benefit of going synthetic, whether it's crumb rubber or an alternative, is that you can play in the rain. Based on a season like we've had, we're still able to have camps on the high school field during the day and still have it being used at night, essentially year-round. We all know that the kids can't wait to get out of the house in the winter, and usually they're on that field at the end of March. Going back to natural grass would really be a big change to that. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, an NFL field, some of them are still natural grass and they're pristine and they're 300-pound linemen playing on this. How come we can't do that? Big difference between pro football and what we use for high school sports, number one, but the biggest difference is that that field might just be used for 3 hours a week, as
Right.
opposed to being used every day after school, even during school for gym classes, during the rain, and so on and so forth. My major concern here is that we would go back to something that was a problem for us in the first place. So that would be more of an expense, because as Bree alluded to, we would likely need another staff member to keep up with the painting of 5 sports on a natural turf field. So when you look at those numbers, roughly $70,000 with all the benefits included in the hiring package, in addition to $25,000 a year in the maintenance costs, you're looking at about $100,000 a year over a 10-year life. There's your $1 million right there. And that's just to play on it when it's dry.
Appreciate that, and although I'd put our staff up against any NFL stadium staff, I can understand that would be cumbersome. But thank you for that, and I look forward to, I can kind of anticipate what it'll be, but I look forward to your final recommendation here for us as we get ready to vote in a short while. Thank you.
Go ahead, Lou.
Quick question. This is on the ground-up walnut shells.
Yeah.
Would that pose an issue to somebody with the nut allergy?
So that is a good question.
Yeah.
And I still haven't received an answer on that.
Yeah.
And that is something that we should get answered.
Yeah. That was the only red flag I had in all those options, was that was a concern there. Obviously, I wouldn't be for that, just because I think obviously people would, I know my son has a peanut and tree nut allergy, so not that he would be playing on the field, but I would have that concern regardless, just knowing that there are walnuts, you know, and with the rain, who knows? So, yeah, but just curious. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. West?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Now, the existing high school field, you said that was installed in 2013?
Correct.
So what's the life of that field?
Yeah, good question. So it's approximately 10 years. It had an 8-year warranty on it, so we're being proactive here in getting design money to prepare the design specs, but it's actually not slated for actual replacement until FY26, so that would be 2 years from now. So we have about a year and a half to get design docs before we put it out to bid.
And the other thing is that the charge at town meeting was to look at both synthetic and natural Did you have any additional comments on the natural? Well, because like I said, it was
Sure.
part of the vote.
I do. I don't know how much time we have, I'll keep it brief. Synthetic turf, much more consistent as far as not only appearance, but just playability of the field. You'll notice, if you go back on Google Earth and do a history, back when we had grass there were significant wear spots down the center line of that gridiron. And although it doesn't look nice, I know Dennis Ingram can comment that one year we actually had to paint the field green. I think it was for a Thanksgiving Day game. Yeah. So all that aside, what that actually is compaction. And if you've ever seen one of my fertilizer presentations, you know that the number one enemy to a natural turf field is not necessarily scuffing or damaging by cleats, it's the compaction. And
Yeah.
you don't have to weigh a lot at all to compact a field. It's just gentle vibration. So when you compact a field, you get more weeds. And essentially what you're doing there is you're lowering the concussion resistance. So in essence, you're making the field a lot less safe. So that's one concern there. Natural grass requires fertilizer. And fertilizer in and of itself is not a bad thing. I mean, we have a lot of natural grass and we're managing that successfully. We pride ourselves in our turf management program, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and this turf management program has been ongoing for over 13 years. So if we were to switch over to natural there, it's going to take some time to grow a resiliency that would combat even the toughest football game damage there. Pesticide needs. We operate what's called an integrated pest management plan on our natural fields. We are not fully organic. We only use pesticides sparingly. But for instance, if we had a grub problem on that field, that's something where we would have to use a pesticide or we risk losing our investment. So obviously with synthetic fields, you don't need pesticides. Watering needs speak for itself. We would not have to water the field, thus saving water if it was synthetic. A big concern of mine is cost going over to natural grass because we did invest a large sum of money in the under drain system, the stone, everything that is designed to stay there if we were to replace the synthetic turf carpet would now have to be demolished and hauled out of town. There's a cost there. There's also a cost in disposing the SBR crumb rubber into a landfill. So one way to look at this is we are being environmentally responsible in one way if we were to reuse the crumb rubber that's there in lieu of throwing it into a landfill. That's recycle, reuse, that's one way to do that. Talked about the labor and equipment needs and the playability during inclement weather. The only other thing I'll add is that there was a superseding order of conditions from DEP in 2012 when the high school was permitted. And one of the conditions in that superseding order was for us to do testing of the groundwater underneath the field because at the time there were some concerns of hazardous materials leaching into the groundwater. So we've been doing that per our order, and I think we've tested the field roughly 15 times, at least since I've been involved in it. And only one time out of those 15 times was any of the parameters higher than the maximum contamination level, or MCL, for groundwater standards, and that was for zinc at the time. So the protocol there was to alert DEP, which we did, and do a retest immediately. It turned out that likely that zinc number was related to the adapter we used to take the sample. We probably just didn't flush it out enough. But other than that, there's a small reading for lead that was just borderline. Again, we retested, and everything else came back under the MCL. So that crumb rubber that's there, if you think about it, has already been pre-washed for the last 10 years. So if we were to reuse it, you know, the concerns that it would be contaminating our groundwater would be minimal.
And I guess I'll talk to our school superintendent, sports athletic director, excuse me, if I may. Do you have any comments about the?
Yeah. Before Jamie's final recommendation, we align with all of his thoughts and his comments. We use that term.
Stand up, sir, I'm sorry,
Oh, sorry.
and introduce yourself.
Is that better? Dennis Ingram, Athletic Director, Wilmington High School. The school and the athletic department support Jamie and his recommendation and his comments. We use that field almost nonstop from when school gets out in the fall and the spring until 8, 9 o'clock. And Jamie mentioned before the wear and the tear of not just football, but boys and girls soccer, field hockey in the spring, lacrosse. It beats up the field. And what would we be looking at if we did go back to natural grass is probably less games at the high school on campus. which is something that we're trying to do, is bring people back onto campus. So we'd be spreading out across the town because the field would need rest. And that goes for games and practices. So we support Jamie and his recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
couple questions. Thank you for your presentation. Jamie, can you tell us a little bit about the Yentile field? In comparison with the high school field, please.
Yeah, so they're both SBR crumb rubber. The major difference is essentially a technology difference, just because we did them in a different time frame. The high school field does not have a Brock pad. It's essentially just the crumb rubber and filament. And what we did at Yentiles, as you know, is we did put a Brock pad in that field. And so our GMAX testing numbers for Yentile field are much lower than the high school. So anyone who's played in that field, I've heard a lot of positive comments that they feel it's a superior field to Alumni Stadium, and I believe that's just really the technology was newer, and I do think it's a pristine field. And so that being said, we did invest a lot of our energy and our funds into making that field not too long ago. And again, all the equipment is the same, and often we can borrow it from field to field.
And there are plans to use the pad as it is at Yentile, you're gonna use a pad at the new high school field, right?
I would recommend that because we had great success with it at Yentiles. I understand with a discussion with Bree earlier is that a pad under a crumb rubber field is not necessary, but certainly it's a good addition to put in if you
I would
wanna
like to
spend
see
the
it,
money.
yeah, the shock pad we're talking, right?
Yeah.
So it's a turf system, and if you don't use a pad, you get more infill. So when you use a pad, the turf fibers are shorter, and there's less infill, and the pad makes up for that cushioning. So it's a system.
Right, but the pad is better in shock resistance, right? It's,
We're showing better
Is it-
GMAX numbers with the pad.
You'll never fail the GMAX test with a pad. That's what we like to tell everybody.
right. And what is EnviroFill? It says it's sand. as
So it's
opposed to
acrylic
coat.
coated sand, essentially acrylic, it's like paint. And it's just like the sand you see on the beach, and then they put a coating on the outside. It's round sand particles, and it's an alternative to the rubber, being that it's more natural. And there are quite a few places that use the EnviroFill that we've done.
Right. Is
It's
that-
probably one of the more called on alternative infills that we specify. It's asked for. I know that Hopkinton uses it in all their fields.
Is that better and when you're getting hit and going down and hitting the ground?
It's
Is
abrasive.
it-
It's more abrasive than rubber.
Really? I wouldn't think that. And if you go with the crumb rubber, are you looking at it being brand new? I know you just mentioned that the existing has probably been washed out and everything else, and I know that, but it's 10 years old, and then if you go with something new, it might be better and improved than what we have now.
As far as the crumb.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my expectation is that we'd be able to reuse the crumb rubber that's there. I mean, that is one of the benefits of choosing that option, is that we're essentially recycling or reusing that already recycled material. So I believe it's an environmentally responsible thing to do. My understanding, talking with Bree, is that the crumb rubber that's there doesn't necessarily degrade to a point where it's not usable.
No.
Certainly in the first couple of cycles. So my recommendation, if we were to go that route, would be to reuse that crumb rubber.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Final recommendation.
Yeah, so based on everything we talked about today, my recommendation would be to, for this particular field, stay away from going back to natural grass. And I would like to see us reuse the existing crumb rubber in another SBR crumb rubber synthetic turf system. But one idea that Gale Associates did have, which I think is a great idea, is one option is we can actually put this out to bid with an add-alt for, the base bid being a crumb rubber reuse of a synthetic turf field like we have now, with an add-alt of an alternative infill material. And that would be picked by, our team based on what we feel is probably a good alternative. So that could be a Brock fill or another material. But at least that way, we could get some price comparisons when the bids come in, and maybe fine-tune our decision. It's about still synthetic, not natural grass, but either a variation of using the crumb or using a natural.
And when you put these out to bid, you will be including the shock pad on it too.
I would like to do that. I mean, we haven't even just started the design process
Okay.
yet, so, but that would be a major factor that I would be looking at.
And for what it's worth with the shock pad, when you install a shock pad, it'll last you through two turf changes. So you install it now, you change the turf, 10 years from now, 12 years from now, the pad stays where it is. You don't have to replace it. So it lasts through 2 cycles. It's actually warranted through 15 years.
So I would be looking for a motion to proceed with design specifications to provide a synthetic turf carpet replacement at Alumni Stadium with the option of an add-on for an alternative infill material.
I'd like to take this out of order and go to the board to consider. Specific design, designing the replacement for the high school athletic field with natural turf. Continue the use of artificial synthetic turf.
Well, it sounds like what you may want to consider is that the board authorize the specification and design of a artificial turf field to replace the existing artificial synthetic turf field.
Number 7, I think.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we take the recommendation of the DPW director.
I'll second.
All those in favor? This won't be done before, I'm assuming, football has to start practicing and everything.
Certainly not, no.
2026.
2026, yeah.
So I'm just curious on,
So the expectation would be to come back to the next annual town meeting with cost estimates for the actual install of the new turf.
thank you.
For the one
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you both, appreciate it.
Okay, communications.
First on the communications docket is a memo from me to the board as a follow-up on housing choice. You'll recall at the last meeting, there was interest in having the town's legislative delegation attend a future board meeting to talk about the housing choice law. And so at the time, a arrangement had been made to set up an appointment with Senator Feingold and Representative Robertson for them to attend the September 11th meeting, and also to have our town council, one of our representatives from the town council firm of KP Law, Alex Wysech, attend to discuss options for special legislation. That timeline we may want to push out based upon earlier conversations in executive session.
I believe we're going to invite delegation for the, what is it, the 24th meeting?
Yes, would be one of the September meetings. Next is a memo from me in response to a question about the impact of consideration for the current Assistant Town Manager, Susan Inman, if she were to be selected as the interim town manager. And I just note that it would be my recommendation that staff in the town manager's office be utilized to pick up some of the functions and responsibilities that she's currently involved in. A lot of the work she's doing now is related to HR, in procurement, we have personnel in the office that have experience in those areas, and I think could assume some of that work. I think some of the work, in all likelihood, will just have to be tabled for a stretch of time. Obviously, it'll have to be prioritized as to what can be tabled, and then to the extent that there is work that she would be involved in that perhaps a department can take on, or some elements of it, that that would be something to consider. Under communications, we have a memo from Jamie McGaldy, Public Works Director, the latest update on the ARPA, use of ARPA funds. You'll recall the town received $7,007,864. The major change from the last quarterly report is that $106,000 has been redirected from the culvert project that was originally contemplated in these funds, and that is being used for the Lubbers Brook culvert replacement along with the sewer project. And then separately, $100,000 was redirected from the culvert project to replace a water pump at the Sargent Water Treatment Plant. So effectively, at this point, the culvert project is, those funds have been completely drawn down. As it was noted, I think when Jamie was here at a prior meeting, that that can be picked up at a later date. Also, you'll note that the water main project on Main Street, that is a major part of this project, over $5 million. At the moment, that's slated to go before the Conservation Commission on August 2nd for a request for determination of applicability. The bulk of that $5.5 million is going to be construction, so you see that we still have a significant amount of money available, but once we get through the permitting process and specifications and procurement is done, then that money will readily be drawn down. The money from the Lubbers Brook and the sewer project, the expectation is the bulk of that will be drawn down by the next time the quarterly report is submitted. The facade and sign grant program, the deadline for applications is August 1st, and so I would expect when Valerie provides a report in September that we'll see some expenditures coming out of that category. We have correspondence from Attorney Mark Rich from KP Law. This is correspondence directed to Paul Scoff, who's a manager with Sprague Operating Resources. This is a notice of claim regarding the Wildwood Early Childhood Center. You'll recall that we had the problem with the ruptured tank. This is putting them on notice. There's been coordination also with Myers Council, because there's another element that Meyer is seeking reimbursement from. So Sprague and Atlantic was the delivery service, have a specified period within which to respond to this notice and demand, and then there'll presumably be some dialogue and discussion. We have a letter, correspondence from Maria Pinard, Director of Division of Municipal Services, DEP. This is regarding a grant award for lead service line inventory and replacement plan. This is, in my estimation, a significant win for the town, $214,000 to inventory the town's water system in terms of the connections for lead. This is something that EPA and DEP are requiring of all municipalities, so the fact that we can have access to this grant, I think is a major win. Green International is going to be doing the work, and we expect that work to start next week. Next, under communication, is an email from Hugh Vandermark. He's expressing concern about the meetings that the Concom has had that have continue to remain in a remote mode. That has been the case now for some period of time. Without getting into particulars, there are individuals that have some health issues and have preferred that the meetings continue in a remote manner, although I did speak with the Planning and Conservation Director, and she in turn has spoken to committee members, and they're prepared to have a hybrid arrangement, so there will be members present, and those that are uncomfortable at this point being in person will continue to participate in the meetings remotely. Under board to consider, the first couple of items have already been addressed in terms of the Liberty Pole and the artificial turf. We have a board to consider approving renewal of a secondhand dealer license at GameStop.
Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt you. I believe we took one vote regarding the turf. I believe here, there's listed,
7.
there's two. We took one vote, and I believe there's 2 items on the agenda, just so we don't miss one.
Yes, the second, so the board to consider, this was premised on if the board was looking to go with artificial turf, the type of material, but I think that was already addressed in your previous motion?
So just to be thorough here, should we take no action on this item?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend we take no action on item number 8.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right, and so the next item, number 9, board to consider approval of the renewal of the secondhand dealer license. This is GameStop. They are seeking a secondhand license for sale of some of their used computer games and so on. There's no concerns expressed by any of the relevant departments, police chief. There's no police, fire, building inspector, treasurer collector, no concerns.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? It's approved.
Next, under board to consider is foregoing the conduct of a performance evaluation on the town manager.
Move to forego the conduct performance evaluation of the current town manager.
So moved.
Second.
Second? All those in favor? It's approved.
There's a board to consider the sale of surplus town vehicles and equipment. There are 13 vehicles / pieces of equipment that the town DPW is seeking to dispose of. The plan would be to post notice in Combis, which is the state publication under the Operational Services Division. It would go on the town's website, be posted in the town crier, posted on our bulletin board here at Town Hall. And in terms of the actual items that we would be looking to sell, we've got a Ford pickup bed, another Ford 250 pickup bed, Ford Freestyle vehicle, over 80,000 miles. Ford F-350 dump truck and plow, 112,000 miles and change. Ford F-250 and plow, 138,000 miles and change. A 2011 Jeep Compass for 111,000 miles. 2013 Ford Explorer, almost 119,000 miles. 2012 Ford Explorer, 97,000 miles. 1988 Vermeer stump grinder. 2015 Ford Explorer, 71,802 miles. Another 2015 Ford Explorer, 84,786 miles. And then we have a tree machine clamp model, tire machine, which is, date of origin is unknown, and a welding machine. And those are the pieces of equipment. So I'd be looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second? Mr. West, all those in favor? So moved.
Next is looking to suggest a schedule for the current fiscal year for town council training. You'll recall that KP provides 2 training sessions at no additional cost. I had suggested previously that the town consider a presentation on the Barron versus Calanda case, which was a case out of Southborough Supreme Judicial Court. Came down with a ruling on March 7th of this year with regard to at the time the town had established some rules of civility, and essentially those rules in large measure were struck down. I think it would be important for our various boards and committees to understand the guidelines that can be used and what is infringing upon certain rights of individuals. So that perhaps would be one to consider. Another topic that's on their list would be acquisition and disposal of land, leases, easements, and restrictions. And then the final category would apply to particular boards, is writing sound decisions for planning boards, zoning boards of appeals, and conservation commissions. So again, they provide 2 of those sessions at no charge.
Are we to, through the chair, are we to decide this now, or?
It would certainly be, the sooner a decision can be made, the sooner we can schedule them with council. It doesn't necessarily have to be tonight, but it would be
What was the last one, Mr. Chair, what was the last one you suggested, Mr. Hull?
writing sound decisions for planning boards, zoning boards of appeals, and conservation commissions. Certainly, when decisions are made by the planning board or the conservation or board of appeals for that matter, we do seek out counsel, so they are involved in the decision process. I think this would be helpful to the individual board members to understand some of the elements that go into a thorough decision.
Discussion?
But I suppose you're looking for something more broad-based, right? I mean, if that's just narrowed to those, and they would go to that.
That's right. I
And
mean,
others would, I suppose, as well, which is a good training tool
it's,
to have.
right,
Yeah.
it's tailored, it sounds like it's tailored to those boards and committees, but I would imagine there are common elements that would be appropriate in to other boards.
Do you have a recommendation, Mr. Hull? You mentioned the first one that you
Yeah,
mentioned
I
some-
definitely think that the first one, and,
one.
I think the second one, I would take the first 2, I guess, if I were to
I
make a
make a motion
recommendation.
that we take the first 2 items recommended by the town manager.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? So moved. You'll contact them to get,
Yes,
know the dates that are available for everyone.
right. Next is a board to consider a request of Michael and Don Namo to light the town common gold during September in recognition of Childhood Cancer Awareness Month.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Next is a board to consider the request of Tara LaFave Stred, Wilmington Youth Hockey, to use Rotary Park for an outdoor movie night on Friday, September 29, 2023, from 6:30 PM to 10 PM. I did exchange emails with Ms. LaFave Stred and suggested that it would probably be more appropriate to use the Swain Green. The last request that they had made a couple of years ago, the board did authorize the Swain Green. I think the major issue with Rotary Park is just the access to parking, and so she responded this afternoon that she thought that would be fine.
A question through the chair for discussion.
Go ahead.
She had asked here if they needed police detail. Do they need police detail?
I don't think there's typically been a police detail assigned. We'll certainly make the police chief aware of it, but I think when others have done it in the past, it's been, handled without detail.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Mr. West. All those in favor?
Next is a board to consider a request of Sherry Almeida from residents on Lakaya Circle to have a neighborhood block party on Saturday, September 16, from noon to 10 p.m. Rain date on the 17th of September, noon to 10 p.m. This is something they've been having now for a number of years, that all the neighbors in that little area are invited. In the past, the board has granted it. We'll make the DPW aware, and if, I think sometimes if they're looking for sawhorses, the DPW can provide that.
Motion to approve?
Notify fire and police also.
Yes, yep.
Motion to approve?
Second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
The next is a board to consider authorizing a temporary order of taking to access property at 333 Andover Street to conduct a Phase 1 environmental assessment. This is, environmental assessment is intended to provide an indication on the property as to whether there are any environmental concerns that the town would have if it was to pursue acquiring the property. And it would be my recommendation that the board authorize this temporary taking.
Do I have a motion with discussion?
Motion to approve?
Second?
I'll second.
With discussion, anyone have discussion over this? No? All those in favor? It's approved.
The second is a board to consider authorizing a temporary order of taking to access property at 333 Andover Street to conduct a Phase 2 environmental assessment. So we will have our environmental consultant do the Phase 1, and essentially it's a site walk and non-intrusive type of inspection. If there are any red flags, so to speak, that come up, they will report back to the town, and depending upon the circumstances, may recommend a more detailed Phase 2 environmental assessment, which could include taking water samples, taking soil samples. It would have do borings into the ground to obtain those samples. So this would be a more intrusive type of assessment to just confirm that there are not any environmental concerns that the town should be aware of. I would just note that this is, as was the prior motion that the board approved, as a consequence of Article 40 of the April 29, 2023 Annual Town Meeting, which authorized the board to go forward with acquisition. And it indicates the said temporary easement shall commence at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time and terminate automatically at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time during the following dates: August 24, 2023, through and including August 25, 2023, September 11, 2023, through and including September 12, 2023, September 13, 2023, through and including September 15, 2023, September 21, 2003, through and including September 22, 2023, and October 19th, 2023, through and including October 20, 2023.
Do I
And it
have a
would-
motion
I'll make a
Second.
motion
with,
as prescribed by the town manager.
Second?
second, with discussion?
Mr. Chair, I would just note that this would only be exercised if results came back from the Phase 1 that warranted it.
Thank you. All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay, we're getting into,
And I'll ask that the board sign these after the meeting.
at this time,
No,
before we get involved with everything,
Oh,
Mr. Kyra, you wanna,
Oh, you wanna do that?
Wanna do
No,
this right
not
now?
at the end, sure.
we don't forget.
There was a letter that came in today to the town manager's office. So this is an item that's not reasonably anticipated by the chairman 48 hours in advance of this meeting. And this is a request from the Wilmington Sons of Italy and the Wilmington Band parents who are planning to co-sponsor a yard sale for raising funds for both groups. This would mark the 10th year of partnering together to raise funds for the students at Wilmington High School. We are writing to request permission to use the Swain School parking lot in the grass area on Saturday, September 9th, 2023, from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. We would also be doing some setup or prep work the evening before. It's a fundraiser, so we're looking for vendors, and the fee to set up for the yard sale is $20 per vendor. There'll also be refreshments sold, soda, water, hot dogs, hamburgers, popcorn, and so forth. There will be music for entertainment as well, and we're looking forward to the favorable response of the Board of Selectmen. We've checked with Beverly Dalton, and that date is available.
Date is available. Do I have a motion to accept?
make a motion?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Hope you
Thank
have a
you.
good day.
I hope it doesn't rain, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
Is there a
I
rain date?
didn't say that.
Is there a rain date on that, or
There is not.
pray for sun?
Yeah. Tense.
Next, under board to consider whether to appoint a temporary town manager following the retirement of the current town manager.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we appoint a temporary town manager following the retirement of the current town manager.
Second.
With discussion, if you don't mind, gentlemen? I have a little concern with this. I think we should appoint prior to the town manager leaving so that it gives the acting town manager time to work out any arrangements that they have to work out together.
Discussion. I was just gonna mention on that, I did, is Joe here? Joe's here. He had mentioned, that they kind of run, that they don't run concurrent. One ends and the other picks up. So we can't have a temporary town manager and a town manager,
Correct.
unless I misspoke, but that's what I believe.
Then I'll ask for a vote.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest you may want to just pose the question to counsel since he's here, but
Hi, Joe.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. So, as Ms. Maselli indicated, what I had indicated previously was that, you know, you need a clearly defined town administrator, or town manager, excuse me. So you wouldn't want to have, excuse me, simultaneously a temporary and the person in the full position. Having said that, though, there are different ways you can work around that a little bit if you wanted to have a transition, but it wouldn't technically be considered a temporary town manager. Or, I think what I noted last time is sometimes there's a holdover period where the outgoing town manager stays on for a week or two or something to that effect, whatever you have in mind, as providing some sort of a transitional services, and you just enter into a short-term contract with that individual. So there's a couple different ways to work around it, but you wouldn't want to have the titles overlapping.
Right.
Through the chair, and that is what I would suggest, is that once the town manager officially retires and leaves the position, the temporary comes in that next day, well, we make an arrangement with the town manager, if he so wishes, to stay on for a period of time
Right.
for a transition, whether that's 1 month or 2 months or to the end of the year, depending upon how long it will take the temporary town manager to feel comfortable enough. And we take that approach, I believe would be the best way to go. But that's my,
I have spoken to the town manager regarding that, and I believe that I would turn it over to him right now to let him give us his opinion so that we can prepare in advance.
so I've considered the request. You know, it's really been clear to me for the last couple of years anyways, that the board has been anxious to make a transition here and to see that I move along. And so I think it would be best that on the 31st of October, that be my last day, and the board can have someone that you're comfortable with going forward.
and through the chair, those words are a little surprising, because I've never mentioned that we wanted you to move along, at least I have not. I've supported you in your position, so I hope you're not taking that, outlook, at least from me, because, I do remember at one meeting, when it was stated that they wanted you removed, I was the one that stood up and said that I wanted you to stay. So, anyways, that's the approach you want to take. That's your approach, but I certainly don't think that you should somehow think or impose or understand that the board wants you to move out. So we just gave you a 3-year contract, and I think if the board wanted you to move out, we probably wouldn't have given you a 3-year contract. So that's I wish you well in retirement, but I just want you to understand that I had no problem you staying the full contract.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just follow up on that, I stand by my vote, twice reappointed the manager in that position, most recently for a 3-year period, so I certainly respect his decision and wish him well.
And by the way, you have until October 31st to change your mind by law. That's another reason why we can't have 2 town managers, right?
I know my first term, I was pushing for a new town manager at that time, and I freely admit it. I believe that's what Mr. Kyle was leading up to, maybe. But in the long run, I sat here, we negotiated a contract. I supported that contract, and I have supported the manager from that time. It's like anything else, everyone's gonna have their differences. It makes no difference because the manager got his contract. It was unanimous. And if the town manager wanted to stay on for a while, I would be the first to support it. But if he wants to move along on October 31st, as he's stated, so be that too. I wish him nothing but the best. But I just wanted to get that out there now that
Mr. Chair?
times have changed.
I would just like to make the motion that we appoint a temporary town manager following the retirement of the current town manager.
It's already been made.
Oh, did
That's
we
already
already?
been
I thought we
made.
didn't vote on it.
We haven't voted.
Oh, we haven't voted on it yet, okay.
No.
No,
Okay, I move to vote.
okay. All those in favor?
Just
Oh.
one more
Yeah.
question to Mr. Hull. Is that sound, I mean, if you go forward with retiring on October 31st, that sound reasonable that you would stay on after that for a transition? Or is it something that you would rather the transition take place before October 31st?
I think the transition should probably take place before.
Before? Oh, okay. That's,
Okay, we have a motion on the, that has been brought forward. Do I have all those in favor? We will appoint a transition at the time that the town manager leaves.
So this next item, again, the intent here was to include a number of key decisions that the board will have to make in the coming meetings. It wasn't necessarily, that the board would have to make this decision tonight or any of these, but the next one is a board to consider appointment of a specific individual or the process for selecting an individual to serve as a temporary town manager. So again, whether the board wishes to take this up this evening or at a future meeting is your call.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I believe that we should consider the latter part of this board to consider the process for selecting an individual to serve as temporary town manager. Just in the spirit of transparency, I would hope that we would somehow identify an individual, then put it on an agenda to which people could weigh in on before we considered it for a public vote. So that's my thought process, and not to get too far ahead of myself, but, I also anticipate making a motion to table a couple of the items that'll be coming up. I feel as if tonight, the most important thing is the one that we're considering now
Yeah.
and the next one. But after that, as suggested, there perhaps will be future meetings, and I believe that will be the time.
Very well. On the board to consider the establishment of a town, wait a minute. Appointments.
We're still on 19.
So it sounds like it's the board's determination or decision to table number 19.
No.
No.
No,
No.
we'd like to make a motion for the process for selecting an individual to serve as temporary town manager. We don't want to appoint a specific individual at this time. Is that right?
Asking for input on what process you want, or you would like to look at for selecting an individual to serve as the temporary town manager.
Jim, I'm okay voting tonight. I mean, in my humble opinion, is I think we have a very capable assistant town manager. And when the town manager is not here in the office, the assistant town manager is the acting town manager for that period of time, be it a day or a week or whatever. And I'll just offer my humble opinion is if our assistant town manager, Ms. Inman, would be willing to assume the responsibility and it can be worked out in her current, that we can do it within, I'm okay with that, but that's my opinion. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that.
Yeah,
Five.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm agreeing with Mr. West. I've thought that way all along. I was looking for continuity. The manager has worked with the assistant manager. When the time comes for the assistant manager to take over, there'll be a smoother, for a temporary period of time, there'll be a smoother transition. We're also moving into budget time, and I believe that having our assistant town manager taking over the reins for for the interim period of time would do nothing but benefit the town.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm not Mr., not the town manager yet, no, just kidding. I'm advocating for it. I'd like to see how the process would go. I agree with both you, Mr. Palmer, and Mr. West. The natural progression would be the assistant town manager. I don't have a problem with that, but I would rather see us see if there's a process through our legal counsel in selecting an individual to make sure we're doing it the right way. Does it need to go out to bid? Are there qualified individuals who are department heads? Are there, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't know. And I want to make sure that we do it the right way. And this is no issue. I am a person who believes in moving up from within, and a person who believes that the next person up to bat is the one that's it. But
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we, dot our i's and cross our t's, and make with this process. So that's why I think I would maybe wait and have an opportunity to talk.
So, if I may, Mr. Chairman, so under the town charter, it does address appointment of a temporary manager, but there really is no real process that's identified. Any vacancy in the office of the town manager shall be filled as soon as possible by the selectmen, pending the appointment of a town manager or the filling of any vacancy. The selectmen may appoint a suitable person to perform the duties of the office. So it's pretty open-ended. There really is no particularized process that you'd have to go through to appoint a temporary town manager, other than just the normal, open meeting law type procedures. In terms of search processes, different towns do it different ways. Certainly one of the options you've already discussed, which is you're drawing from within potential candidates that already have a familiarity with the town, with the office, with the various, tasks of a town manager. There are also individuals, predominantly retired former town manager, town administrator types that will do this kind of work on an interim basis. They're limited by state laws regarding capping retirement hours and earnings, but they will make themselves available and come in on a short-term basis. One advantage, obviously, is those folks are coming in with the experience of having already sat in that chair, but the disadvantage is they have oftentimes no familiarity with your town, how it operates, how the offices work, how the charter works, just a lot of things that are sort of unique to each and every individual town. So it's a judgment call, really, depending upon, what the board's preferences are.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
And, I want to be clear, I have no hesitation about our current assistant town manager's ability to serve as town manager when the time is needed. I've been thoroughly impressed by her, in my opinion. I think what I'm more comfortable with is, number one, I'm not going to ask her here this evening if she'd be willing to do this. I think I could probably guess. But I think a more formal solution would be to have an individual, such as their assistant town manager, write a memo to us that she is interested, and that we receive that memo, and then we vote on it. I'm just trying to be mindful of a very thorough process. I believe that this person may serve in this role, whoever it may be, for interim period of time, could be a few months. And I want to make sure that we're doing this the right way. Now, if that means that we have to meet in short order again to solidify this, then by all means. But I would feel more comfortable if we heard from the person formally that they are interested in serving in this capacity, that it be placed on an agenda for the public to weigh in and give us input, and then we formally vote. I'd feel more comfortable. I think I could already anticipate the outcome, but I want to make sure that we're doing this process thoroughly and carefully. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Mr. Chair, that was what, I concur with both, with everybody. I feel the same way about Susan. But that's where my mind was going to. It was more about the process, having any conversations. I love Greg's idea if somebody's interested to do a memo and things like that, because I too don't want it to come across that we're just, throwing it out there and getting it done and crossing it off our list, which I kind of feel like that whoever it would be is what we're doing. So it was just about the process. So I agree. That's what I was thinking.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
In doing so, are we, I hate to say it, well, I don't hate to say it, but are we opening the job now as a temporary town manager up to bid so that not only Ms. Inman can apply, but are you saying that we could receive other letters for either internal or external letters?
We would be receiving, it would be open to anyone. They could send us,
Yeah.
inform us that, they're interested in the position. And then it would be a decision of the board to select one out of the, if we get 2 or 3 people in or more, to select who we want for this temporary position.
Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, that's not what I suggested, but
Right.
I specifically said if she would like to write us a memo.
Right.
She is the assistant town manager, so.
Yes.
So obviously, the natural progression, but
Right.
again, this is just spirit of being thorough and being mindful that this is our most serious charge that we have as a board members. So
Yeah.
I want to be thoughtful. I think Ms. Maselli raises a good point that we don't want to, this shouldn't at any point appear to be a rubber stamp for anything that we do up here. And I don't believe we rubber stamp anything, but we certainly don't want that suggestion to be made.
Right. And Mr. Chair, if I may, I just wanted to add on that, which is, Mr. West, he's right. Anybody could come in. It's like anything else. But I also think, I agree with, Susan's the next, person in line. That's who it should be. I mean, I have no problem with that. But I also think when you have situations like this in any organization, you also want to open it up for anybody else who may be interested for us to consider them. Doesn't mean it's going to, whatever, you know what I mean? Because I think if you don't do that, people feel like, it's kind of like when you post a job, and you don't post it internally, that ruffles a lot of feathers,
Well-
So I just think it's again, it's the process. It's just going through the process and feeling it through.
Well, then what we'll do is, we'll continue this till we receive letters from anyone interested. And what are we gonna need to, because we're gonna have to send out a notice on this.
Well, Mr. Chair, I would quite frankly suggest, and certainly, you can take my advice, I guess, for what it's worth, but that, the fact that there is an assistant town manager, and if Susan Inman is interested, that it would seem to me she would be the go-to.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
she's
agree.
been in that role, now here for, a year plus anyways, started in January of '22. So she's been through a number of the important work that goes on, whether it's the budget process, negotiations. I've worked with her closely. I think she's very competent, quick study, and I think it's not uncommon. It's very common for communities where there is an assistant town manager for them to take on that role, certainly at least on a temporary basis until a final decision is made. From a continuity standpoint, I just think it makes a lot of sense.
Mr. Chairman, the other thing that I would want to do is that we'd have to, if we're making somebody, if you will, an interim town manager, we need to come up with a rate structure. Compensation structure, because
Well, it would more than likely go right over to the manager's scale, I'm assuming.
No. That's a contract.
You would, Mr. Chair, you would probably set up a subcommittee to have a discussion with the person who's been selected at our next meeting or the meeting after, just
Yeah.
for the purposes of a contract.
Through the chair, could we ask Attorney Fair that question? Could we ask Attorney Fair?
Yeah, sure.
What
On the
specifically is
salary,
Salary.
just
Yeah, so the,
view.
it really depends. I mean, I don't mean to give you a non-answer, but that's
okay.
essentially really what it comes down to. It depends on how involved the role's gonna be, what the expectations are. You know, when you have a situation like this and somebody has some existing job duties, what's happening to those?
Right.
So there's a lot of variables that go into play. I typically, what I see is something not necessarily on the same plane as the permanent town manager job, because it is, again, it's just a temporary position. But if the level of responsibilities are approaching that and some, then, you know, that's something the board would need to take into account.
Right.
Obviously, the employee's gonna have some say in it as well.
Sure.
As to, you know, what the job might be worth, once it has a little bit more context of what the expectation is.
Right.
It's a little bit different when you're dealing with someone coming from the outside. They have no other responsibilities but this. You're taking from somebody from the inside, they have some additional responsibilities internally already.
Right.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, getting back to it, we're just not gonna take Mr. Hull's contract and cross his name out.
Oh,
for
no, I
Susan
didn't,
Inman's name.
I apologize, I didn't mean it like that.
Because he has different
Tenure and-
variables in
Oh,
his
yeah.
contract that she may, or whoever it might be, may want in their contract, so.
Right.
That's why I think we take it in a formal process,
Right.
as was mentioned. We get the formal letter, we take the formal vote, and then you would, I believe, would set up a subcommittee, as has been done traditionally in the past, to have discussions about the contract.
I believe, well, no, go ahead, continue on.
So under,
Okay.
thank you. Under the process, which I believe is which way the board is leaning, I believe that the process should be that we request a memo formally from the assistant town manager, one way or the other, how she feels formally, because she is the assistant town manager, and the natural progression is that the next person should be the assistant town manager. Once we are in receipt of that, we can, if she is interested and the board's interested, we could take a vote. And then there would be a negotiation process, and then by a subcommittee, which would be brought to the full committee, voted on, and then, so that's kind of how I see this unfolding as we're
I agree.
proceeding. So that makes sure that we're, very thoughtful, and
Yep.
obviously we want to be fair. If someone is going to fulfill this role, we want to compensate them fairly. We have to come to an
Absolutely.
agreement.
So can we go, is there a motion on 19 now? There isn't. So I'd like to make a motion for the process for selecting an individual to serve as temporary town manager with, as Mr. Bendel just stated, receiving a memo from Ms. Inman if she is interested or not, either way,
Or any
or any,
department head.
Department
or
head.
individual,
yeah, and just, I mean, not to complicate, I just want to go through the process, so whatever that is, and just let the process,
And
Just a
Work out.
question, do you want to establish a date certain for that?
Yes.
I would say by next meeting.
Memo from,
I would
was
s-
our next
I would
meeting,
say with,
August 14th.
before the next agenda is set.
Yeah, before the next agenda is set.
And I don't know if there's any plans to meet prior to what's been scheduled, but
At this time, no, we're
Gary?
gonna wait and see how the,
I don't want to interrupt you, but I just want to ask one question so that I'm clear, and I appreciate everything you're being very clear about. In terms of if I am competing in a situation where other people are writing letters, then I would assume that's some sort of an application process, and I would assume that I would send a resume too. So I just want to be very clear on that, because I wouldn't want to send you a letter and have someone else send you a whole package of you know, accomplishments and resumes, and I didn't do that. So if you could let me know if I'm doing that.
Mr. Chair? Sorry, I can only speak for myself, but, you know, I believe that what we ought to do, this process entails going to solely the Assistant Town Manager first. It being that she's the
Right of
Assistant
first
Town Manager.
refusal, right.
And if she's not interested, and again, I'm not looking to put her on the spot here, because I think it should be, you know, formal, then we would move on. But as a courtesy to our very capable Assistant Town Manager, that we ought to extend her this courtesy first. That's just my
I
own
agree with
personal-
that. I think that's a great idea.
Mrs. Edmonds is here now. She has made her comments. If we'd like to ask her.
I would not like to ask her right now,
Okay.
but I'm only one person.
Just figuring she's here. She's heard the conversations, but now the question will be, as she brought up.
Was there a second to your motion? I'll second it, so we can move the vote.
Okay.
All those in favor, then?
What's the motion?
So the motion is the process for selecting an individual to serve as temporary town manager. We want to take that up as opposed to an appointment of a specific individual this evening. And adding that we'd like to get a memo from Ms. Inman stating whether or not she is interested in serving as temporary town manager. We're only asking for her. We're not asking for other interested
else?
parties.
From no one else.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay.
Oh, second.
I'm sorry.
She was just
Yeah.
repeating.
Yeah,
All those in favor?
all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty.
Next, item number 20, board to consider establishment of a town manager screening committee with respect to the number of members, the composition of members, and the protocol for appointment of each member.
Okay. My recommendation to start out with is that we have 5 individuals from the town. Each selectman can pick an individual that they'd like to see on this committee. And then the discussion will be is how many selectmen and how many department heads should we add on to this?
Mr. Chair, how many people in total are we looking for?
I'm looking at either 7 or 9.
Can you tell me that, what you had just
Seven.
said? No,
Oh.
what, the people that you're talking about?
We're talking
You say
about
5?
5 will be
Seven.
residents of the town, and we will each select one. Then there'll be 1 or 2 select people for the board. And then we have to decide on two members of the town management to sit on it also. And if we feel that we have to increase it, we have to increase it.
Mr. Chair, if I may. So you're saying, so each one of the board members will select a resident
Correct.
to sit on it, but then you're saying that 2 board members will also sit on it?
1 or 2 board members will be sitting on this committee.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's,
okay.
so that gives us, right
That gives
there,
us
that's
7.
7. And if we decide to go 2 members of the upper town management, that'll give us 9. I mean, if we, I've been advised to not build it up so big that there's more confusion than anything. I was advised to go 7 or 9 with these. And I like everyone's input on that.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to suggest the alternate to yours that I did at the last meeting, and that would be 5 members. Each member of the Board of Selectmen choose an individual, so that's 5. The Chief Financial Officer of the town of Wilmington, who is our appointee and is a department head. That would be Brian Perry. The chief financial officer of the school department, which would be Paul Ruggiero, a member of the finance committee, and a member of the planning and conservation committee, which would total 9. As I mentioned before, I'm sure we'll all be engaged in the process, either watching the meetings or attending the meetings. In addition, as I mentioned, and this is, I guess, for another portion when it comes to criteria, I would personally want to see all of the applications. But for setting up just the screening committee, I suggest this alternative, that we put in our representative, the CFO for the town, the CFO for the school, finance committee member, planning board and conservation committee member.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, in my mind, I first go to an appointee from each board member, which has been kind of a tradition when we've been filling other positions. I like that, and I think there seems to be some agreement around that. I do have concern about 2 members of this board, given the fact that we're looking for input from a screening committee, and we'll ultimately make the decision, which we all know. And then I wondered if there'd be those seats would be better suited by someone else, such as, I like the idea of Brian Perry. I like the idea of, I hadn't thought of it, Mr. Kira, but Mr. Ruggiero, given that the school is approximately about 50% of the budget, almost, I'm just approximate. And then, if the finance committee wanted to appoint another member from their board, that would be fine with me. So that's kind of what my mind is at. Ultimately, we're going to be making the final decision. I wondered if we would be criticized, or whoever those individuals might be criticized, for stacking the deck if we were on the screening committee, then all making the final decision. If we filled the 7 or 9, I'm not really biased to either one number, but if we filled the 7 or 9 with, other individuals besides ourselves, it's a great way to get more input from folks, so.
I have no qualms with that idea, but I believe at the last meeting, it kept on being brought up, possibly 2 members of the board. That's why I brought it up. I just assumed that we don't sit on it at all.
Yeah.
We let them present to us as a whole.
I agree with that presentation.
Do you want to make a motion to what I suggested, Mr. Chair? Unless I'm sorry, Mr. Webb.
I was just wondering through Attorney Fair, through you, Mr. Chairman, Attorney Fair, what have you seen in other communities?
Well, again, these are all very unique to each community, if I'm being honest. I do hear the comment that if you have 2 members of a 5-member board on a screening committee, it really depends on, if your goal is to sort of get an unvarnished look at the candidates, right, wrong, or indifferent, you do open yourself up to potential criticism if you put 2 of your own members on that board. However it goes, some in the community or in the public at large may say that, well, the select board put their thumb on the scale, so to speak.
Yeah.
So if you stay out of that process, I think that's what I would say that a lot of communities tend to do when they go to a screening committee, so that they can remove the board itself from that type of criticism. Not to say that it doesn't happen, that some board members might not, some towns might not put a board member or 2 on the committee. But that is what the risk you run when you do that.
And the other question that, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, the other question that I have is that when the school committee recently several years ago now hired Greg Brandt as their superintendent of schools, was the selectman involved in that?
Yes.
Was there a member of on the screening committee? Was there?
Yes, it was me.
Okay.
There was quite a few of us. It was a very large group, which was a screening committee that made a recommendation to the school committee. I believe it was 2017. And I was the appointee from this board.
I'm just thinking, we have the CFO of the town side, Brian Perry, do we need the CFO per se of the school committee, or is there somebody other than that best suited? I'm just trying to say out of the total finance picture. But I don't know, maybe town manager, I don't know if you have a recommendation on a
I
screening
think the
committee.
suggestion, at least that I heard a couple of members suggest, it sounds like Paul Ruggiero, who's the Assistant Superintendent of Administration and Finance, their finance person, I think that makes a lot of sense. Having a representative from the school department, which is, as was noted, 50% of the budget or thereabouts, and understanding the fiscal situation on the school side.
Also should note just about Paul Rosiero specifically, if he's interested, and if we decide that he served as superintendent before, too, so he's been around, and I think he's highly respected by most.
Oh, and I have no qualms, just, I have no qualms specifically with Paul. I'm just saying, you got one finance guy and then you added another finance guy, but, again, if the
They
board
share the
wants to go with
budget,
it, I don't have an issue with that. I just, like I said, I was just trying to figure, so we're getting a broad base, somebody other than a finance person.
Well,
Do you want to make a
I-
motion,
uh,
Mr. Chair?
just 1 second
Okay.
first. This could be a good panel, and with the 5 citizens, residents, and then 4 from the town, will give us our 9. I think that, that's the best way to move it along and get it moving. Mr. Kyra, make your motion?
Sure, I'd like to make a motion that the selection committee be comprised of 5 appointed members from each member of the Board of Selectmen, the chief financial officer of the town of Wilmington, that being Frank Perry, the chief financial officer from the school department, that being Paul Ruggiero, a member of the finance committee, and a member of the planning and conservation committee. Now, I didn't, okay, so then of the planning board. I didn't make name recognitions of either of those two. I think we go to the chairperson and ask them for their consideration of who they would put on the board.
And if for some reason, the school CFO was reluctant about getting on this, he could make a recommendation also.
Yeah, well, I would think that if the CFO of the town, or the CFO of the school, or the finance committee, or the planning committee cannot put a person forward, then we'll have to come back and revisit how we're going to make up the selection committee. That's,
I'll second the gentleman's motion for discussion.
Discussion?
Thank you. I have 2 items. Number 1, just so I'm clear, Mr. Kyra, and to my colleagues, I like this idea and I support this idea. Then the idea would be, once we have all these appointees, come back and make a final vote to, yes, this is the committee. Once we've got commitments from each of these individuals, then we would vote to, okay. So just wanted to be clear on that. And secondly, through you, to Attorney Fair, you made a really important point the last time you were here. I wonder if you could just elaborate on it. You were specifically talking about just who could be asked, and you kind of advised us, and just, that, and I left here thinking about, some of my closest friends would have no business being on this committee, because they're just not familiar with town government,
Yeah.
right? And I just wondered if you could reiterate that point that you made the last time you were here.
Right, I think what Mr. Bendel is referring to is that, when we're talking about 5 residents, what you want to make sure of when you look at the total composition of your committee is that you have individuals that, have some familiarity with how town government works, how, what the town manager job entails. It's not to say that a given individual member of the community might not have a lot to offer. They have a complete background in private sector work and really don't know the first thing about running a community. That person brings still a different viewpoint and may have a lot to offer. But if you have too many of those folks on, you may not be balancing out your committee well enough so that you're getting people that understand, you know, what it takes to be a town manager. Because being a town manager isn't quite the same as, you know, running a private sector company. You can have also too, just to remind the board, when you're talking about members of the community, some of the members of the community are some of the folks you mentioned, you know, whether it's a finance committee member, whether it's a planning board member, conservation, you can still be drawing from your board members who do have some of that familiarity. I'm not saying that you want to exclude private residents that have no connections to town, because you may want to include some of those as well. But you do want to take into account what they're going to bring to the table and how much they're going to be able to contribute to what Mr. Hull and whoever's going to take his spot next, really, you know, what he brings on a day-to-day basis and what is needed for the role.
Thank you for that.
So, Mr. Chair, it's a real important decision that we have. I mean, we could look at different people, a human resources director of a company as a selection, or, you know, just a lot of deliberation needs to go into this for, you know.
Precisely, that's what I'm suggesting, and it's a little trickier, because if you're all individually, you know, picking someone, then you're not necessarily figuring out, you know, what that balance looks like. So for example, if you all think it's a great idea to have someone with a human resources background, you may wind up with 5 individuals with human resources background, because that's sort of the process that you're utilizing. So you just want to kind of give a lot of thought to what the individual members are just going to be able to contribute and bring to the table. So there's a balance.
Well, I believe what you will find also is that we are 5 individuals up here who are going to be recommending the most important position that this town will see in the next, hopefully, 20 years. I believe that each individual here will bring present us with a name, a person that will be qualified to run through the gambit of all the interviews, all the resumes. But I strongly believe that we should have 5 residents on this subcommittee to present us with the most qualified individuals. And I have no qualms with my fellow colleagues here giving a name of a resident that you would probably say, that was a good move, or this was a good move, or this was a good move. You know, I mean, I've been thinking about it, and, you know, I think we will have a competent board, a subcommittee, and we'll have the 4 individuals from town government that if they see it straying off line a little, they'll be able to explain a little more on what the town manager job entails. So I don't have any, I can't think of a negative thing that I could bring for the 5 appointees. Knowing my colleagues, like I know my colleagues, it's not gonna be, you know, hey, buddy, you know, you're my friend. No, they're not going to do that. I think I know Mr. Carr, Mr. Bendel, Ms. Maselli, and Mr. Wessel enough to know that they're thinking about it, and they've probably been thinking about it, and they may have a selection or 2 that they want to present. And I don't see that there'll be any issue whatsoever with who the selection is. But we have
Are we
motion
at a
on the
vote?
table,
Yeah.
on the floor.
Sorry, go ahead.
Further discussion, if I may?
Yes.
So is the expectation of the selection, the turnaround time, should that be included in this discussion? Like when we might need to know an answer from the person? I would expect this will take time. You'll have to decide who you're gonna choose, ask the person, give them a chance to decide, and then turn it back to, make the nomination to the chair and the manager, I would imagine.
I would like to see it at our next meeting.
Next week?
Our next meeting.
Oh, it's like what?
The next one's scheduled for the 14th of August, so that would make,
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I apologize. That just
No,
said
no.
next week. I was like, what?
I believe we've got to get this
Yeah, I think
board,
that's fair.
this subcommittee going. And we can't keep dilly-dallying, which we're not. But let's get it moving. And I would appreciate that we all had our picks ready for the next meeting.
Further discussion, Mr. Chair?
And
I'm sorry, we need, I'm sorry.
And we also already know, by the way, Mr. Kyra has presented the motion with the CFO of the school, CFO of the town, the Finance Committee and Planning Committee, that we know who's going to be there, and hopefully that we'll get acceptance from them so that we can present the whole subcommittee together at our next meeting.
Oh, you were first.
So now question is that, just to finalize on the process, if we bring our 5 candidates forward, names forward, are we voting on the names? Like we have Steve Smith. Are we going to say, okay, does this 5 of us like Steve Smith?
Imagine it would be the entire roster. We
Yeah.
just vote on yea or nay.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the way I was looking at it.
Okay, because I didn't know if we're looking to, like if we're voting on individuals or,
No, I believe what we would do is vote for the committee.
Yeah.
Here they are.
Yeah, I think just to drill down a bit, first let me, for all transparency, you may have seen me go to my cell phone. I don't want people to think in the past that we had accusations of things. My daughter asked me if my dog was fed, so I said, yeah, I fed the dog. So, so you know, so that's all that's in there. But I think what we need to do is figure out who's going to approach Brian,
That's what I was
Terry,
gonna ask.
Paul Ruggiero, John Doherty to appoint a committee member, and the chairman of the planning board to appoint a committee member. Would we have the chairman of the board do that, or would we have Mr. Hull do that? Because we need to know the names
Yes.
on the 14th, and we need to know if they say yes or no.
Yes. I would-
Because
I was gonna-
if they
I
say
think-
no, then on the 14th, we're going to, figure something out.
Through the chair, I was going to ask the same question, Kevin, but I
I was
would
under the
assume-
assumption would be, I would
okay.
present it to them this
Oh.
week. That if,
You'll-
if there's,
You'll email them or whatever, call them.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Do we vote on
Okay,
this?
we have the, we have the motion on the floor.
It's been seconded.
All those in favor? Okay. The panel's going to consist of 9 individuals.
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that board to consider 21, 22, 23, and 24 be tabled until the search committee has been formulated, and allow them to establish a criteria and a timeline so that they can then present it to the Board of Selectmen for approval. And then we move on to our advertising and how we want to do that.
Then that would be brought forth at our next meeting also.
Well, no,
No.
and once
No,
the.
no, that's
I'm-
right.
I'm saying, once the committee is formulated, the committee will meet, they'll elect a chairman of the committee, and then they'll come up with a criteria, which I believe is somewhat in the package that could be handed to them, a timeline as to how they want to proceed, and then they'll come and present it to us for us to either add to that criteria, like I want to see all the applications, if that's not the,
Yeah.
or if the timeline is, we think it's too aggressive, we want to extend it out because we want the flavor of the temporary town manager, for 4, 5, 6 months even. I don't know, to see how that works. So I think, 21, 22, 23, and 24 kind of relates to the makeup of the screening committee. So that's why I'm suggesting maybe we table that until we get the screening committee all lined up.
Then, in that case, Mr. Kyra, on 25 and 26,
25 and
26
26.
are date specifics that we're gonna have to do, so should we wait on that too?
To post a job, I think we need to start
Well,
doing
we-
that now.
I think on 25 and 26, we can
Post.
post the position in the Beacon
Yeah.
and some other social media publications. All we need is the description of what's being posted for us to approve it, I think. You know, so as we mentioned, we don't want to mention a salary. We want it to be commensurate on experience and other than that, I'm sure that the Beacon has many examples of postings of town managers' positions that we don't have to create the wheel. You know, it's
Just to
out
be
there.
clear, there is in your packet information that was
Right.
submitted in the last week as well as this week that talk about a,
Yes,
town
I saw
manager.
that. It's in the draft form,
Right.
Mr. Hull, yeah, and I did see that. And it just all depends upon how big of a splash you're gonna make in the paper, whether, you know, is that too many words or whatever. I don't know what the Beacon has or the other paper or print for prices.
I just want to remind you that the Beacon comes out once in the summertime in that August, and I believe that would come out in September.
September, right.
So if you were to try to push that earlier, it would be online only with the MMA. The Beacon would be available in September. So just letting you know.
But we could get it into print though, couldn't we, Susan?
For August, the August-September issue, I believe we still could.
Okay.
But it'll probably be, we've got to, you know, make a decision on that and move. And I
Right.
do think a lot of them do have salary, just saying. If
Yep.
you look at the Beacon, they do, but they usually do a platform and say plus or minus. And that's how they address the,
Yeah, I'm personally not prepared to put a salary range in there. I just think it,
To be determined.
yeah.
Chairman, just through you, could I ask a question to Attorney Fair? Can you table more than one item at a time, or you have to take them up individually?
So at this point, you know, it's a board meeting, right? Select board meeting. So if you passed over these items and then they just found their way onto a future, like, I don't know that you have to formally table and then, you know, like you would say it like a town meeting where you're tabling something and then removing it from the table later on. For these items, if you took no action tonight and they showed up on a future agenda, that would be fine. You
Thank
wouldn't
you.
have to formally vote.
So you
Start with
want us to make a
21.
motion to take no action, Mr. Fair, or just take no action?
You've discussed it, if you're taking no action on these items at this point in time, there will be no action taken on them, and if you put them back on an agenda later on, that's sufficient. Like, there doesn't have to be a formal, again, it's not like a town meeting article where there really should be a definitive outcome. For these items, if you decided that for, those items and take them up collectively, that will just delay action until a future meeting, that would be sufficient. If you wanted to take that vote, you could, just so the minutes reflect what you did, that would be fine, but it's not critical. The minutes would still reflect that no action was taken on those items.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we take no action on a board to consider items 21, 22, 23, and 24 this evening.
I'll
Second.
second.
We all second.
Okay, second, discussion? All those in favor?
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Fair.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question on the individuals. Like, when we go to pick our 5 individuals, do the individuals have to take any training through the town to be on a subcommittee?
No. 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 They're
No,
just-
they-
they're-
They
They'll
may,
have to
I
be
think they're gonna
sworn in,
have to
I
get
would
sworn
Sworn in.
in, and they'll get the conflict of,
Interest.
the open
Yeah.
meeting law document that the town clerk provides them.
Okay. Thank you.
25.
So number 25, board to consider approval of town manager posting and date to begin advertising for town manager search.
Discussion?
Discussion, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if we ought to try to identify, if it's not this evening, but in the very near future, the end goal here for us. So obviously, we know we're looking to hire a town manager. We have already decided tonight that we're going to go forward with an interim solution. But I wonder if we ought to identify how long we might anticipate that. And we're not going to be able to pinpoint a specific date. But just the way my mind works is we've got to work towards a goal. So if the goal, and I'll just lob out an idea here, is that we know that we have a very important FY25 budget that will need to be developed by the interim town manager, and I'm confident that we can find someone good to do that. And then on January 29th, that person or someone is going to present that budget to this board, okay? And then the very next evening, present to the Finance Committee. And then we have a series of Finance Committee meetings, followed by a joint meeting in March and a big town meeting on May 4th, with a bunch of important dates in between that. So, in my mind, this interim position may go as far as town meeting. That would allow for this committee to thoroughly conduct a very fair and thorough search. And it would also allow the interim person to focus on the budget. And I know there's been some suggestion that maybe the interim is after the first of the year. The only thing I would say about that is someone would be coming on, presenting the budget in their very first meeting, presumably, under that assumption. I think I'm more comfortable with saying that we want to have to the committee a deadline of the spring. It's very vague, it's not a specific date, but if we could get somebody on board in the spring, that would be, I'd feel more comfortable about the FY25 budget. And just as I mentioned the last meeting, this isn't we're not going to find someone that's going to give 2 weeks' notice. They're going to give maybe 30, 60, 90 days if it's not an internal candidate. So I want to be fair to them. And so I just want to be mindful of our ultimate goal here when we talk about advertising, and I do want to stay close to this item. I want to be clear that we're kind of working towards a goal, and that perhaps in the near future we ought to identify what is that goal. Obviously, the goal is to hire someone, but in what manner and what time frame?
So, Mr. Chair, with that thought process, which I do agree with Mr. Bendel, that maybe we should also take no action on 25, 26 until the screening committee has been formally approved.
Yeah.
Agree.
And then we'll
I agree.
go from there, because it does make sense that we take that approach. And it gives a great opportunity to the, whoever that person may be, for some real strong work, and quite frankly, to prove that that temporary person deserves to be a permanent person. So,
Right. Yeah, Mr. Chair, I agree. I was thinking we would need to get the advertising out first, but I'm glad Mr. Bennett brought that up, because I think that's a good plan. I think that's a good, so I think we should table those two actions as well.
Before we take it up for consideration on tabling it, I don't want to drag out the advertising, whether you're looking at advertising, it's probably not gonna come out till September anyways. The committee's formed, the end of September maybe. They start interviewing. You're into November already. You know, I would like to see us get the advertising at least squared away as soon as possible, and we can bring it up at the next meeting also. So do I have motion?
Mr. Chair, just to make a suggestion, I think it would be important to decide to Board Member Bendel's point, how long you're looking to have the temporary town manager in place, because if the temporary town manager is going to be in place through town meeting, and certainly I think there's a lot to be said for the idea that, you know, as the budget process gets into full swing, you know, that you have to consider, do you want to have the author of that budget? Certainly it's a team effort between the finance director and the town manager and the assistant town manager and school superintendent and so on, but essentially the author is the town manager. Do you want to have that temporary town manager hand that over to whoever gets selected and then bring that through to the finance committee and beyond? I mean, that could be a bit of a challenge for someone coming in off the street, so to speak. So there is value in if having the temporary town manager create the budget, present it to the board, and present it to the finance committee and town meeting. If that is the case, though, then I think you have to question, does it make sense to be advertising in September for a position that's not going to be available until May?
Yeah, I'm also
Well-
looking at it too, as we've discussed previously, that even if we hire someone, say we get someone, and we're gonna hire someone the middle of December, they are gonna have to give notice to wherever they are. You're looking, again, as Mr. Bendel said, 30, 60, maybe 90 days. Now you're into February, or March. So you're close to the town meeting anyways. You know, you wanna wait to advertise till, let's see, October? So be it. But we have to take into consideration that whoever, if we hire outside, they're gonna have to have time to give the notice to their current employer. And again, 30, 90 days is easy.
I just want to make one point. Manager Hull's memo had suggested that we'd fill in the cracks while we went along. If this does extend over a 6-month period of time, you may be looking to appoint a temporary HR ATM, just because I do know how busy our office is, and you all know because you see me here. So I just want to throw that in. I don't want anybody to be surprised by that if that does come up, because it's
Right.
longer term.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to be fair. Obviously, tonight we've asked our assistant town manager to indicate to us whether she's interested. Well, I just want to be fair about what we're asking of her, right? Are you interested? And I wanted to be clear and I can only speak for myself. I don't intend to speak for everyone, but, you know, to be fully transparent of where I'm thinking this process might go. And to your point, you know, it's almost like it's easy for us to sit here in July and say, how about on this day we do that, or this day we do that. I tend to agree with my colleague, Mr. Kyra, that let's let the committee form together, put together some ideas on how they believe this timeline should go, and make a recommendation to us, whether we adopt it, modify it, or not.
Yep.
But we have time, if we have that end goal in mind.
Yep.
And if we come to an agreement in the near future to say, you know what, that does sound good,
Yeah.
that we can do a thorough, very thoughtful search that includes, 9 very worthy individuals, and that we have our administrative team focused on the FY25 budget, solely on that, which is the most important thing for our town. That we can all feel comfortable, we don't feel rushed, and we don't feel like we missed something
Right.
along the way. I certainly don't have the answers as we sit here July 17th.
No.
This is certainly all brand new to me. So I want to make sure that we measure twice and cut once. We want to be very thoughtful about this process, and I'm, I too think we might as well go ahead and table the final 2 pieces, because heck, why not? That seems to be the theme.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we take no action. But can I quote you on that? Measure twice and cut
Cut
once?
once.
Yeah, that's
There you
that's an important one.
And so I'll make a motion, we take no action on 25 and 26.
I'll second.
All those in favor? So be it.
Okay. Public comments?
Public comments?
Fair, he probably wants to go.
Ah, Attorney Fair, thank you very much, as always.
Thank you.
I see
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good
your
evening.
chariot's waiting for you.
Thank you.
No public comments. Moving on to to new business.
Well, you've got announcements?
Announcements?
You got announcements? Oh, I forgot those. Announcements? New business?
Mr. Chair, there's been a few mentions, and I've mentioned it myself, but full disclosure, but about the possibility of an additional meeting here. And I know everyone's busy in the summer months, so I just wondered if that was gonna be the case, one, do we see it to be necessary to meet again outside of what we have scheduled, which is August 14th? Is there any other reason that we might have to meet? I'm just trying to plan ahead, and
Well,
if there's not a reason to meet, then
I don't think there is right
Right.
now. I don't think there is, because we're extending everything out so far that I was thinking of an extra meeting just for, again, the town manager search. But since we're extending everything out farther, I don't believe we would need one, so. Next.
that clarification.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Under new business, I know back some months ago, the MBTA committee had a select board member vacancy. I'd like to be considered for that vacancy. I don't know if we need to put that as a board to consider for next meeting, or if anyone else is interested in assuming that role.
We'll put it on for the next meeting.
Thank you, Frank.
Now, important dates.
Important dates, so Sunday through October 1st, Farmers Market, Town Common Parking Lot, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. July 19th, concert on the Common, 6:30 p.m., Ball in the House. July 26th, concert on the Common, 6:30 p.m., Backtrack. August 1st, National Night Out, Rotary Park. August 2nd, Town Hall School Administration Building Committee meeting, Town Hall, Room 9, 6 p.m. August 7 is Purple Heart Day. August 9 is a brush drop-off Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. August 9th is also a Senior Center Building Committee meeting, Town Hall, Room 9, 6 p.m. August 10th is the Library Summer Bash, Swain Green, 5:30 p.m. August 12th is another brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then August 14th is a Select Board meeting, Town Hall, Room 9, 6 p.m., 7 p.m.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor? Night, everyone.
We'll need to sign off on those orders.